The presentation was given by a student, and it's advisable to have faculty and staff here, or whoever else, to help answer questions the committee may have. Presentation will be out 30 minutes, time limit, and the committee could interrupt, ask questions, although there'll be nice interruptions. Afterwards, we'll move into discussion, and we'll have about 45 minutes. I mean, it really kind of just depends on how the discussion goes, but it's supposed to last about 45 minutes for that. Then after the deliberation, the committee will reach a tentative decision on your fee. And then a final decision, the final decision for the fee level will be set on February 12th at 5 p.m. in the MU ballroom. And then if you could also send your presentation to me so I can link it up on our website so everyone else can see too.
Certainly.
Cool, and you can go and get started.
Great, thanks. Well, thanks everybody for being here this evening. My name is Brian Laird. I'm the fee board chair for the Student Sustainability Initiative, and this is our presentation for our FY14 budget. So just to give you all a little bit of an overview, our proposed student fee for fall, winter, and spring term is $6.63. As you can see, that's a pretty significant decrease from our original fee, which was $12.01. The proposed budget amount overall is $443,873, and you can also see it broken down by index, what's going to specifically the Student Sustainability Initiative and what's going to transit. That was a, I'm sorry. Yeah,
one real quick. Everyone, you have a small packet of like 3 papers that he sent me yesterday as an update, so that's why if you look at the main submission, the numbers don't match up. So if you look at the smaller one, that will match up to what he's presenting. Cool.
Thank you. So overall, that amounts to a $251,109 decrease in the dollar amount of our budget. That's a 36% change, 36% decrease from the previous year, and in the dollar amount of the fee itself, that's $5.38, which amounts to a 55% decrease. And actually, sorry, one more thing that I wanted to mention is one reason that we have not done a summer fee in the past, nor did we propose one this year, was simply that the majority of the work that we do during the summer, like having our staff there and things like that, are really in preparation for the upcoming year and really getting people familiarized with the program so that they're able to handle the demands of the upcoming year. So we didn't really feel it was necessary to be charging summer students a fee for services that are predominantly for students throughout the rest of the academic year. Also, to kind of give you a little bit of a historical perspective on our student fee, I started in fiscal year 2008 because that was the year when things really dramatically changed for the program, and it more closely resembles what it does today, like with having the Student Sustainability Center, paid positions, and of course the green fee. You can see there's a little bit of a spike in 2011 when we added transit to our budget, and a little bit of a decrease the following year when they went fareless, so that eliminated part of the student fee. And you can also see the kind of reduction that we're looking at for this fiscal year, or for fiscal year 2014. To kind of start off a little bit, I'm sure you all are familiar with the SSI Review Committee that we went under last term and towards the end of summer. So just to kind of give you all an update on some of the recommendations and the kind of status on where we're at with that right now. One of the recommendations was to better differentiate between administrative goals and student goals regarding sustainability. That is something, the status for that, the due date was set for June 2013. And having the recommendations at the end of last term and getting everything for the budget, that's one area that we haven't had a lot of time to prepare or kind of focus on yet. Same thing with updating our strategic plan and assessment plan. However, for other areas like updating the bylaws, we did do this term kind of a preliminary revision, and our plans for that is to start comparing it to bylaws of similar student fee funded programs and trying to identify areas where we might be able to expand or refine it. Some of the other recommendations, grant tracking, that is something that we have implemented in place right now, and we're continuously working to try and refine that. We have particularly good tracking for our travel grants and our project grants, but wage grants, as we try and expand on that program, that's something that we're going to be setting up tracking for. And if we are able to add research grants, that is also something that we'll add a tracking mechanism for. With the revolving loan fund, we currently have our first project in the queue. From my understanding, the loan agreement is written up. Right now, it's just sitting on somebody's desk waiting for the final signatures, and that will be for the Salmon Disease Lab for a new heat pump system to make their operations more efficient, and that will be a $160,000 project. For professional staff, that is something that we have requested in the budget for this year, as I'm sure that you've all seen. And as far as looking for alternative funding sources, aside from things like the revolving loan fund, that's something that's going to hinge largely on whether or not we have a professional staff member, because right now, particularly with like grant writing and seeking different opportunities like that, it's not something that our current student staff can handle on top of their current duties. And of course, with the fund balance, we are working on putting together a formal project plan for some things that we would like to work on. Obviously, the scope has been diversified and expanded from focusing just on energy projects to things also in the area of like food, landscaping, transportation, waste reduction, things like that. So it's definitely a new area for us for working on these larger sustainability projects, but we're working on a plan and working on refining that. So I'm sure all of you have noticed that there's some pretty significant changes in our budget this year, some pretty big increases in some areas, decreases in others. So to give you all a little bit more context and information about that, starting with staff. So currently we employ 10 student workers. That is a director that oversees the program, an administrative coordinator that assists in many of the director's duties, as well as helps other staff members with kind of day-to-day operations, and the fee board with budget tracking. We do not employ any professional staff currently. What we have proposed is 11 student workers, and by and large, the makeup will stay the same. I forgot to mention we also have our marketing team, which is our visibility coordinator, our design coordinator, and our events coordinator. And then in addition to that, we have 5 project coordinators that work in specific areas of sustainability, focusing on energy, food, landscape, waste reduction, and transportation. So our proposed student staff structure for next year is going to look very similar to what we have this year. Really, the only real change is the addition of one more staff member, and we would like to add an additional project coordinator focusing specifically on water. That's something that we've been wanting to do for some time, and we've kind of discussed, and we feel like, particularly with the review committee's recommendations to try and expand on a lot of the kind of educational and awareness projects that we do on campus, that it's a good time to add that project coordinator. Probably the biggest shift in our staff is the proposal of adding a full-time professional staff position. What we are requesting is $40,000 for that position, and that is also an idea that we've been kind of talking about for the last year or two, and particularly with the recommendations from the SSI Review Committee. We feel that this is a particularly good time to implement that, and we feel like it'll really help us in a lot of areas in our programming, specifically with assessment, because we have what I think is a good assessment plan right now, but as far as really taking the time and energy to put into that to really ensure that we're doing the best that we can, we really need the support from a full-time professional staff position. And I also mentioned when it comes to looking for outside funding sources, particularly researching different grant opportunities and grant writing itself, that is another thing where we could definitely use some additional support from a full-time staff position. So as you can see, the overall change that comes out to is originally for FY14 or FY13, for example, we had a little under $61,000 allocated for student wages. And you can also see in FY12, we actually spent a little over $75,000. So we really need to, we've had overages the last couple of years, so that's something that we really need to expand on. Furthermore, we also would like to be able to make, with that expansion, make more hours available to different student workers. Particularly, I feel like in some years we may not have taken into consideration, let's say like 11 weeks during the term for students that may be available or interested in working finals week. More staff that, if they might be interested in continuing and working on their projects over the summer, or sorry, over breaks, particularly because students are gone, but a lot of the professional staff members that they work at OSU are obviously still here and they still need support for their projects. And this also helps us fund more staff or have more staff opportunities for during the summer, as well as ensuring that everybody can work as much as possible during the first or the 2 weeks before classes start, because we have a pretty intensive kind of training and orientation for folks. For grants, that's another area that I'm sure you all noticed that there's some pretty big changes with our various programs this year. For project grants, that was something that we decided to keep the same and not expand on. This year, we didn't have the same level of growth and interest that we had the last couple of years for project grants. It may have been an off year, but we don't feel like there's any reason to try and add more money to that the way that we have the last couple of years. For travel grants, this is the second year that we've done travel grants, and the first year we had $10,000. Those funds were pretty underutilized. This year we had $5,000, and we're actually about $100 off from hitting that mark right now. And still have about 2 other applications that are actually in the queue to be reviewed right now. So that program this year has really blown up and been incredibly successful, and there's been a lot of student interest around it. So we would like to be able to increase that amount to $7,500. The wage grant, that's another part of our grant program. And traditionally, we've only funded positions for a couple different offices and programs around campus. Those were for the sustainability office, a student worker position in there, because we collaborate so heavily with that program and we also receive a lot of support from them. It makes sense to have or to fund a student worker in that office. Another applicant that has traditionally applied for wage grant funds is the Organic Growers Club. I'm not sure if individuals are familiar with it, but they're a student club on campus, one of the more active ones, and also more robust when it comes to overall size of volunteers. So we also fund 2 summer interns that work for that over the summer and help kind of keep everything in shape while the majority of the student population are gone. So those are 2 things that we are expecting to see applications for again this year. And it's also an area that we'd like to be able to try and expand and try and identify where there are other areas on campus that may not be getting the kind of support that they need from student workers to advance sustainability. And research grants, as I'm sure you noticed, is an entirely new line item for our budget. This is also something that we've talked about probably the last year or 2 as something that we've been wanting to do. Specifically, we wanted to focus on funding undergraduate research and also more kind of short-term research, because typically for like graduate level research, there are more funding opportunities and they tend to be over a longer period of time, whereas for undergraduate students, there's not as much funding available, and it's hard to find opportunities where if they maybe just want to do some research for like 1 or 2 terms. So we would really like to be able to add $10,000 for that. We've also discussed with Kevin Ahern, who handles all of the undergraduate research programs at OSU, about kind of what that would look like and trying to figure out logistics and how we would work with him to help facilitate that. So I think we're off to a good start to get a good program together, and ideally we would be able to start funding internships beginning fall term. So have individuals apply over the summer and start their internships as soon as fall 2013. So the green fee, this is another area of our budget that has seen big change. So in FY13, we had $485,646 allocated to it, and for this year we are requesting $100,000. So what we're trying to do now with the green fee, following the recommendations of the SSI Review Committee, is no longer fund E&G buildings as we had in the past or had been looking to fund in the past, and start diversifying the kind of projects that we work on. So rather than just focusing on energy, expand that to food, landscaping, transportation, waste reduction, water, things like that. Particularly the Student Experience Center, we've had interest from the project manager for that in trying to receive funds from the SSI to try and advance some different sustainability initiatives within that building. And there was also a charrette that was held, I believe over the summer, to try and identify different areas within the SEC or to try and identify how we could make the Student Experience Center more sustainable. And some of the really big things and big ideas that came out of that meeting was, on the whole, really try and make that building a learning tool as much as possible for students. So trying to have different sustainability features emphasized as much as possible, and give students the opportunity to learn about exactly what they are, how they make the building more sustainable, things like that. Some of the ideas that were thrown out were some solar, photovoltaic, and hot water systems, as well as a demonstration garden and a rainwater collection and utilization system. So to give you all a little bit more context as well, with the green fee, as to why we are requesting such a significant reduction in that, we do obviously have a significant fund balance that we can use to fund some of our projects. I wanted to, I guess, give you all a little bit of a better picture, though, on kind of where we stand with our fund balance as far as money that really is available to be working on these medium to large scale projects. So our fund balance as of January 22nd, which was the day before we submitted our budget presentation, was $1,114,699. Obviously, that's a lot of money. So trying to identify some different areas that we're doing to reduce that, we estimated that we have about another $83,000 worth of operating expenses left for the rest of FY13. We also have the Sustainable Energy Revolving Loan Fund, and that is a fund within itself. As I mentioned, we're in the process of getting out $160,000 for our first project, and we would like to be able to create a new index for that, so we can better differentiate funds and make it clear that it's not necessarily just, in our fund balance, something that we can use for anything, but it actually is a specific loan fund that is going in, going out, and used for a specific purpose. We're also exploring some different solar photovoltaic projects with rec sports, specifically on the tennis center and outdoor recreation complex. The estimated project cost for that is going to be about $350,000. And that's something that we've been discussing with Rec Sports for a while, and currently we're in the process of putting together an MOU of kind of long-term maintenance and kind of who owns the PV when it's done. Another expense that we're going to be having this year before the fiscal year ends is a green roof that we are working on for one of our covered bike parking structures, and that's going to be another $6,000. So also taking into consideration the money that is required for a budget of our size by OUS, what we project is having about $306,000 as of July 1. That is actually available for these mediums to large scale sustainability projects for the green fee. So we feel that that in conjunction with the $100,000 that we're requesting this year is still a good reduction from what we've received from the green fee in the past. Yes?
I think one thing I noticed you forgot in there was your spring infusion of student fees, which will be about $210,000.
You're right.
So that will, so that will bring that up to about $560,000. Yeah.
Certainly. Thank you. Yeah. No, that was something that I forgot on there. So we are looking more at $500,000 within our fund balance that's unrestricted as of July 1. Sorry, that was in color before. And one thing, and one of the reasons that I have this diagram on here too, one thing that I want to point out is some of the medium to large scale projects that we do work on. I guess they're incredibly valuable in conjunction with a lot of the kind of education and awareness and outreach that we do. And I feel like some of the recommendations from the review committee as far as expanding the kind of work that we do there and trying to be more engaging to kind of the everyday student and doing more of that kind of outreach and education work. It's an incredibly valuable component of our program, but one thing that I think that we need to keep in mind is that we still need to have, being a very large emphasis of our program, is a lot of the work that we do around infrastructure and really tangible demonstrations of what sustainability looks like in practice. And particularly, I think that the SSI, in the past, we've done a very good job focusing on environmental sustainability, but that's not the only component, and we would really like to be able to expand on that more. And particularly with the economic environmental sustainability, such as facility design, resource conservation, and just general more sustainable operations, I think we do need a robust amount of money within our green fee to be working on these medium to large scale sustainability projects. Also, so to give you all a little bit of a summary of some of the general questions that you asked, one of the things that you were wondering is just students served. So from our original FY12 kind of general highlight report, we estimated that it was about 2,067 students that we had that is some kind of structured involvement with the program anyway. And from some of the assessment work that we have done this year, we've estimated that's about 1,978 students that we have impacted this year alone. So I think that we are definitely experiencing a good amount of growth in the program and doing a better job on outreaching to a higher number of students. There was also a question about some programs that are new from last year that we tried. So that was the internship program, and that was something where either students could take for credit or not for credit, do an internship with the SSI and have an opportunity to work more closely with some of our project coordinators or our support staff to better familiarize themselves with the program, maybe have a little bit more of an in-depth involvement with it, and also ideally groom them and get them interested in staff positions. And that was something that was successful last year. We had 7 interns total, and 2 of them did stick around. Well, they applied for staff positions anyway, and they were hired. And actually, I should change that. 3 individuals applied for staff positions. 2 were hired, though, and are on staff now. In response to your question about our response to increased enrollment, a couple of the major things that we had done last year to handle that was our PR campaign. That was essentially, we had some different kind of swag items. It was particularly trying to have a focus on things that can help individuals live a more sustainable lifestyle. So like reusable bags, mugs, cups, things like that. And also trying to really just try and get out into the student population as much as possible and really make ourselves visible and make ourselves known so students were familiar with us and some of our activities and ideally get involved. Another thing that we did was a student survey because we were, especially with the growing population, trying to get a better idea of what students are interested in and really what the kind of things that we're working on or what kind of things we should be working on to serve their interests. So that was successful, and we had about 500 students fill out that survey. Another question was about some of the new programs that we were working on this year, and there's certainly much more than this, but some of the main ones that have been particularly successful were like the mushroom workshops and field trips, and these were just workshops where people could create something to actually grow their own mushrooms at home, and also field trips, kind of like learning about how to go out and find wild mushrooms. And then our bike loan program was another a really successful program that just launched this year. And that is something that we were working on last year as well. And that's essentially trying to expand upon the current program that Rec Sports has to rent out bikes, but also make the rates more affordable for long-term use, and also add more bikes to the program. So that one's getting off the ground now. And another thing, which not so much is new program, but something that we've kind of picked up that we worked on a little bit more in the past, is doing more kind of open spaces and some different kind of general trainings for students. So open spaces, essentially what those are is it's just a very open, flexible space where people kind of break out into general issue focuses to just talk about their general interests. So this is a really good way to have students feel welcomed into the SSI, get a good perspective on kind of what they're interested in, and also have good opportunities to be able to get them involved with the program and also make them feel like they have a strong sense of ownership over the projects that they start, because ultimately they're the ones who started them. Yes?
That's something I saw on I don't know if you're going to cover it here, but the new program was a food assessment committee?
Yes, that was something that we've been working on as well.
Is that, like, how developed is that, or what does that look like right now?
At this point, I think Amy could probably feel that better since she works more closely with staff members, because that's something that our food projects coordinator is working on. But that is something that we actually started from the Sustainability Advisory Council on campus and created a subcommittee out of. And I believe it's been getting off the ground a little bit. Do you have anything to add to that?
So our food coordinator is working with housing and dining and with interested students to start a committee that can advise on some of the things that the managers of housing and dining have expressed interest in, is the different better ways to compost food, and specifically a food grinder, which we're not exactly sure what that is yet or what they mean by that, but she's researching that a little bit more. And then just working more with students to understand what they want and then be able to do a food assessment tracking. So whether that be computer software or what that is exactly, she's still talking to them to work that out, but they want to be able to track like, you know, the demand for organic foods and then how much they actually get and how much they actually get sold and, you know, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Those sort of in local food and those sort of sustainable practices that be adopted.
Okay.
Easily into housing and dining.
Okay, I would even, that's something you might be able to collaborate with other student fee fund organizations, like you could, definitely the MU would be one, Rec Sports, and, I mean, you kind of assess maybe the vending machines that they have, and kind of just look at better options, more healthy options that way.
Yeah,
Vending machines, that's a very good idea. We are currently collaborating with MRFs on it.
Yeah.
We hosted a VWell meeting at the SSC, and several people were there from some of the food clubs and things like that on campus, and VWell themselves. So we're definitely looking at partnerships to help support that.
Okay.
But I would love to tackle the vending machines and the bottled water as well, hence
Yeah.
not only one thing, hopefully the water reporting will be interested in, but yeah, vending machines are.
Okay, cool.
So the committee just basically is people from housing and dining, our food coordinator, and interested students.
Gotcha.
And then trainings, those are more just kind of general trainings on giving students the abilities to be more effective student organizers. And then summary of some of the specific questions that you all had for us. So some of our project plans, we had submitted with the budget submission a very rough overview of some of the initial research that we had done for some different project ideas. And we've refined that a little bit since that was submitted. And some of the main ones that we pulled out are adding some different runs to CTS, particularly during peak times where there's a lot of student use. So making it alternative transportation more accessible and easier to use for students. Expanding the bike loan program, which I had mentioned, rainwater collection in buildings, hoop house food production. That would probably be like a potential partnership with the Oak Creek Center for Urban Horticulture, and also electricity submetering installations in some different buildings, which would be the first step in starting to kind of create some different kind of smart metering technology. And also one of the questions about transit as far as whether or not students are being double charged. Sorry, I just blacked out. So what I would say is they're not being double charged because currently what they're paying for the fareless ridership for CTS, that is what the city utility fee is going towards, whereas the fees that the SSI collects are going towards the Beaver bus and the Philomath connection. So there isn't an overlap.
And the fareless fees is just for like general city of Corvallis bus.
Certainly.
Not Beaver
Yep.
bus.
Exactly.
Okay, because I have to respond to an angry parent about that.
Interesting.
They left me a voicemail.
What? They looked your name up and left you a voicemail.
You have a voicemail that they're angry about being double charged. At least their kid is. So, okay, cool. Thanks.
Cool. Yep. And also to give you all a little bit more kind of information about some of the kind of innovative aspects of the SSI. When we, I'm not sure if people are familiar with STARS, this is the Sustainable Tracking Assessment and Rating System. But essentially, if there's an institution in higher ed that takes sustainability even half seriously, they're going to be using that as a metric to figure out exactly how well they're doing and compare themselves to other individuals. So within that, we were responsible for 2 of the 4 innovation credits that OSU as an institution received. And that was for the solar trailer that the SSI has, as well as the uniqueness of the SSI itself, and really the breadth that we have in the different areas that we work on. And outside of just the innovation credits alone, we were responsible for another 11.25 credits for the institution. So that really helped OSU push over the edge from silver into gold. And we received a score of 66.16, and the minimum score for gold is 65. So I think it's clear to say that without the SSI and a lot of the work that we've done, some of the recognition that we have around our sustainability work as an institution as a whole would be lower. And also, when we did receive the ranking of gold, at that point in time, we were only one of 9 institutions within ASHE that reports to STARS that had received a ranking of gold. And also to identify a couple different areas that we're saving students money. As I mentioned, trying to find different alternative funding sources like grants is something that we're going to be pursuing more in the future. At this point in time, some of the main things that we have are the solar trailer, for example, that is available to any student group on campus, or anybody on campus for that matter, who may like to have it at their event. It can power electronics, so particularly for things like in the MU, quad and some different events like that. It's rented for free, so it's an alternative source of energy, so they can be more sustainable. So they don't have to pay for that service someplace else. And also, of course, because we're using solar, we're not going to be using energy off the grid, so that saves some money for the MU as well. We also have the Sustainable Energy Revolving Loan Fund, and as I mentioned, the first project for the Salmon Disease Lab is out, and that's, oh, my time is about up. That is something, yeah, we have for the Salmon Disease Lab, and I think we'll have a pretty good return on investment on that, and I believe it was about a 5-year payback, so we'll have some new money coming in. And then also, I would say...
Interest will be generated on that, because there's currently around $300,000, correct, in the revolving loan fund, but
Yes.
it's not being funded anymore because it would, yeah.
Yeah, so we're not capitalizing it anymore, and the interest rate that we charge is 2.6%,
Okay.
and that's kind of set by OUS. And the one last thing that I would say is to save students money is just really a general knowledge of sustainability too, and trying to, I guess, yes, whatever aspect of sustainability that students are interested in. I think there's definitely a cost-saving component. Even things like, let's say, like our composting workshops, where people can work on like their own worm bins. If they like to garden and they have that compost, not only are they being more sustainable by diverting food that would otherwise go to the landfill, but they're able to use that, and they're used to be able to get the compost and be able to use that for their garden and have a product that otherwise they would have had to pay for. There are other things like even just gardening, teaching students more sustainable gardening practices. There are also a lot of different opportunities to work within our garden, and we've also done some different kind of container gardening workshops, so students can take home their own kind of garden starts when they're done with the workshops. So I think there are a lot of different aspects in just, I guess, living a more sustainable lifestyle that inherently end up saving money. So that is all I have. Are there any questions from you all?
Yes.
Yeah.
A quick thing
Yes.
on the, so how much interest will you be receiving from the loan to Salmon Lab?
Let me do that. So it would be
Five-year payback.
2.6% of $160,000.
Yeah.
It's over the course of 5 years, though, the payback. So we don't receive it in one lump sum.
Oh, yeah, but I imagine like next year, you'll receiving some interest,
Yes.
which is not on your budget. You don't,
No. Okay.
yeah, there's no interest included in your budget.
I see. Yeah.
Yeah. So we'll just add that one.
That was a mistake. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's fine. It's minor. And then there's another thing about the interest would be
Mhm.
interest from your fund balance too.
Yeah.
So we'll compute those two things in
Okay.
there. I just need to find the sheet that has the interest amount. And then I'll calculate. Do you have the exact amount for the salmon lab disease?
I can provide that. Not off the top of my head, but I can
It's
provide that
about
information.
186,000-ish.
It's what? Yeah. Or as far as the interest, that's yes.
Okay.
So 186.
Okay.
So yeah, the 26,000 from
And
the
it's 2.6%, you said?
2. Or no, sorry. So it's 160,000. So 2.6% of that.
160. No, it's my Outlook doesn't really allow me to search. Okay, thanks.
Brandon, do you have anything to add to that?
No, I mean, that's an estimate at this point, the
Yeah.
160, but that should be closer than our previous estimate.
Okay, so that's about 4,160.
And that's over the course of 5 years.
Yes, you'll
Okay.
get that each year. Oh, no.
So yeah, 2.6 divided
No,
by 5.
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, come on, Brad. This will be 850, basically. 832.
Yeah, I think so.
Where's those mandated increases? I think, I'm not sure how encompassing your mandated increases are, because do you have minimum wage students?
They're above minimum wage,
Okay.
so we did not increase wages
Okay.
in any way. So
Do
yeah,
you-
we evaluated our
Do
budget.
you,
The only,
do you evaluate like compression of wages that way at all?
pardon?
Like, with the fact that they're actually not getting paid as much above minimum wage anymore?
At this point, considering there was, I guess, strong encouragement to keep wages steady,
Okay.
we decided not to increase it any
Okay.
further.
So I know that in 11-12 you used almost $84,000 out of $390,000 in the green fee, and now we're looking at the proposed reduction down to $100,000
Yeah.
from $485,000.
Mhm.
Do you know what, like currently for this fiscal year, how much of the green fee you all have used?
We haven't used any this year, and essentially since about last March or April, we've been on a spending freeze for funds from that. Part of that came from concerns from last year's budget, and then of course the creation of the review committee. We were instructed not to go forward on any of our kind of renewable energy projects. So for the last year, we've been unable to work on those.
So is that incorporated then into your projection of the fund balance? If you were able to spend, $350,000 on your the solar project, the remaining $83,000 and the $3,000 from the revolving loan fund, or wait, that's separate. That wouldn't work down your fund balance.
Look.
That's weird. That wouldn't work that down. That's not true. That then, let's do your budget or approved budget for the fiscal year of $485,000 would be still money that you need to spend down even further. So do you think, what all are you planning to do, or is it necessary for $100,000 if now after the spending freeze you're gonna have almost $500,000 in addition to $1.1 million that you have to spend down when you're already 3,000% over your OUS recommendation?
Certainly.
If you only used $83,000 last year, what are you planning to do that you would need that extra $100,000 on top of working down what will now be $1.5 million basically?
Definitely. And one thing, I'm not sure, did you have a chance, Brad, to share with folks the original plan that we had for renewable energy projects on campus?
There is this one.
Yes. I think so.
Yes.
Is that, okay.
Yeah.
Perfect. And I can pull that up as well.
Yeah, if you can pull it up, that'd be great, because there's
Yeah.
only like
Certainly.
one per table, so not everyone has one.
I think I will be able to better answer your question after I pull this
Yeah.
up. Because essentially, the reason that we haven't been able to spend down a lot of that is obviously within the past year, even though that we did have a comprehensive plan for various renewable energy projects that we wanted to do on campus. And after going through the process with the review committee and receiving the recommendation to essentially not do the projects on that list, we're starting from scratch. So at this point in time, we do not have a formal plan put together because that is something that we still need to create since we just received the recommendations in December. But there are, as I mentioned, the project manager for the Student Experience Center has expressed a lot of interest in using SSI funds for that building. And particularly, something like the Student Experience Center, where it's supposed to be kind of like the hub of student activity on campus, I think really if there's one student fee funded building where we should just kind of go all out and make it a shining example of sustainability, that should be it. And $500,000 worth of projects for that, we could easily do $1 million, so I do not anticipate any problems trying to find $500,000 worth of projects for that building. And in addition to that, some of the things like expanding like the bike loan program, working more on like green roofs around campus, extending routes to transit. There are a lot of other projects that I think we can be working on in addition to the SEC.
Yep. And so within the new plan, I know that after the review committee met and presented to SIFC, we discussed not using basically any SSI money for non-student fee funded buildings.
Yep.
And so that's still within your strategic plan, because this still includes, but that's for the current fiscal year,
Sorry.
those
Yeah.
non-student fee funded buildings. So in the plan, there won't be any projects working on non-student fee funded buildings.
Nope,
correct?
eliminated. That plan, what we did is we wanted to provide that to you all. Just to give you an example that we did have a comprehensive plan of projects that we did want to work on. So we did have, years worth of projects. But just wanted to show you that, I mean, it definitely takes some time to put something like that together again. But yes, the new plan that we were working on does not include E&G buildings. Would you still like me to pull that up?
Yeah.
That one?
Yeah. Just one we copy
Sorry.
Do you have the actual dollar amount, just so I don't have to try and round the math in my head, and what the green fee would be with your reduction of $385,000?
I get to it real quick.
The dollar amount like in a per student per term or just the?
Yeah.
I got it.
Okay.
It's 67.
I don't. It was just an aggregate of the entire budget.
It's $1.49.
Okay.
From
From 8 something, whatever it was.
850. So for the current $100,000 level of the green fee, that's kind of a guess. You're really not sure how much you would need going forward with the, I guess, the more limited scope of a green fee, and since you're not really going after huge projects anymore with the green fee.
Well, I don't know that we necessarily, I wouldn't say that our scope is limited now. If anything, I say that it's expanded because we're not just focusing on energy, so we're also focusing on like transportation, waste reduction, things like that. So I think there are definitely, that opens the door for a lot of new opportunities in different buildings. Whereas before, I think a big concern that we had was not finding enough projects for just, or I guess enough energy projects for just students fee-funded buildings. Now I think that since we're expanding past that, I think we definitely can. But to answer your question, no, we do not have a plan put together because, as I mentioned, we simply haven't had the time to put together a plan since we received the final recommendation.
All right, I guess my concern with that would be it's just a number that are hoping that it gets up to that point. It's really a total guess with no idea on what that actual number could be for the next year. So that would be my concern with that $100,000.
Certainly.
Because you have plenty of working capital to kind of go over the next year and observe what the actual funding level might need to be like set at for that number.
Like how much is actually used in the next fiscal year, this almost approved fiscal year, so that then we could, thank you for pulling this up.
Yep.
So then we'd be able to make a pretty accurate assessment, I think, right,
Yeah.
of what that fee amount should look like, rather than just saying, okay, let's just go with 100,000 even, because we spent almost 90,000 last year. I have a question about, just because we've been talking to a lot of other student fee funded organizations about responsible spend downs, right? Just because, making sure that, as we all, remember, like, all of these organizations exist only because of student fees. Making sure that, whatever we do or when we're spending down these large amounts of working capital, that we're doing it in a responsible manner, in a way that students feel the impact of those whatever is spent, right? So, like, talking about specifically the Student Experience Center, I think, great idea, huge, the hub of, student, the student building basically on campus. Whenever it comes along, it's a great idea to spend a substantial amount of effort or money on projects like that. But how are you working on anything to make sure that that's happening in a responsible way rather than like, because I know there's so many awesome things you can do, but as a student fee funded organization, there are times where we need to kind of pull back a little bit and be like, okay, we need to be a little more fiscally responsible because there's all these really amazing things. It would be wonderful if we had unlimited resources. Unfortunately, that's not there to make. Is that taking place specifically within that project?
Yes, I would argue that it is because essentially, I guess. We really are a year behind in the money that we wanted to spend. So, and like I said, starting from scratch with projects, I think we can do that in the most responsible way possible. But I think we just need a little bit more time to actually put that project together. Furthermore, I think as far as, all the kind of projects that we were looking at and, the kind of projects that students voted on with the green fee, those are things that we had planned. And this is essentially money that we had in the queue that we were wanting to hope to use all last year. So essentially what we're looking at now is, let's just say hypothetically, had we been able to spend that money last fiscal year and we didn't have the kind of constraints that we did, what we'd be looking at right now is a fund balance with $500,000 less, some amazing projects that are responsible uses of student fee dollars around campus, and we'd still probably be asking for the full amount of the green fee. But we do recognize that it doesn't make sense to be asking for, let's say, $800,000 or $900,000 when we still have that extra money. So I do think that it would be we can use those in the most responsible way possible. And I especially think that.
Just so you're talking about, you'd still ask for the full fee amount, even when before the spending freeze, you still are only spending a third, almost less than a quarter, or a little over a quarter of what was actually approved within that budget. You would still ask for that amount because if you weren't using it before, that's kind of how this kind of enormous working capital was created in the first place. So has your organization been able to look at and realize maybe over the past few years that number was exaggerated a little bit so that you can still do some of these really awesome projects like you're talking about and provide, I guess, kind of the evidence to students say, hey, look, here's your money in action, right? This is what we're doing with your money right now. You can see, what we're working on. You'd still say that you would ask for that full amount, even though in past years, I don't know. You only provide the last year. If we could see maybe a longer trend, we might be able to see maybe the 10, 11, 09, 10, figure out what levels were spent at.
And actually, so to answer that, as far as like fiscal year 10, for example, at that point in time, we weren't actually using that money for renewable energy projects on campus. We were still purchasing renewable energy certificates for the entire university, for the entire institution's energy consumption. So we discontinued that in, it was FY11. I guess we diverted some of that money for the revolving loan fund, and it wasn't until FY12 that we actually decided to stop doing RECs altogether. And making that jump, we were in very new territory. And I think over the last couple years, we've definitely had some setbacks and some challenges in trying to identify projects that we can, really good projects that we can get done or at least get started within a year when we have that money. And I think that we've learned a lot from those experiences, and especially being able to kind of broaden the scope on the projects that we're working on, and perhaps working on some things that maybe we are a little bit more familiar on, let's say like transportation, for example. I certainly think that given the experience that we've had over the last couple of years in identifying best practices to use this money, and our familiarity with other kinds of projects, I think we can certainly use that money.
I'm interested in, you don't propose any use of your working capital to reduce your fee? Like you're funding your entire budget off your operating, off your request for next year?
I'm sorry, we're working
But
the projects.
So we're talking about the actual budget using that to work down working capital as well. Because right now it's only projects rather than part of like your total like operating expense budget.
And the thing is, because our fund balance is pretty much only a result of the green fee, we thought it made the most amount of sense to use that fund balance only for medium to large scale sustainability projects and not rely on an unreliable source of funding to fund our really core operations. So-
Unreliable source of funding.
it's just our fund balance, something that's obviously going to be depleted. So I think that, so you were saying that even though, so there is a reduction in student fees, yes.
They've still been charged $11 over the past like 3 years.
Yeah.
For something that has been really, you've been using like $3 to $4 of.
And not just the year we're talking about the freeze, because this is
Yeah.
going on for much longer than that, obviously.
I mean, I understand.
1
the
year longer,
intent
yes.
Of where this is supposed to go, from a student's perspective, they're gonna be like, what do you mean? Why have I been charged so much over these past 3 years when I shouldn't have been, basically. So that's why I have also trouble just sitting, I don't really see how there's huge, especially when you're like, sure, I mean, this is good, but it's not, it's just kind of a way to, use the money, and I just have trouble not using any of the working capital at all that you've accumulated over the past few years to help offset your fee request as well.
I think one thing that's very
Because
important.
that's something I
Yeah.
got from the review committee too.
Yeah, I think one thing that's important to keep in mind is these medium to large scale sustainability projects, I think working on projects like that, I think is really what makes the SSI more unique. And I think that's why we've gotten some more recognition because of the program over the years. I think that, focusing just on the kind of like student outreach and education and awareness is great. And a lot of the kind of workshops and projects that we do. But in order to, really ensure that our student fee funded buildings and our campus really reflects a culture of sustainability, we need to have these infrastructural improvements. And we cannot fund those if we do not have money from the green fee. And I think that is something that is very important. So I think perhaps the difference is maybe just, the level of importance that we're placing on these projects.
I mean, the sort of cultural of
Yeah.
sustainability is, I don't really exactly see that as throwing PV projects on top of buildings. It's like, I think the tennis center is like, that's when we talked at the end of winter term, and we kind of agreed, I think tennis center is a good project. It's very visible. It's pretty feasible, and I know Dixon's, I talked to Bill today, and he said that, yeah, he doesn't foresee much trouble with that at all. So I think that seems like a good idea, but I'm just not sure how this cultural sustainability would come across by throwing PV projects on top of buildings.
I think that you need to examine every aspect of, the OSU community to really reach that culture of sustainability. Yeah. I think a very large portion of a culture is essentially how we live, the environment that we live in, and how we consume. If our hub of student activity and the thing that students kind of look on for their main experience, just using the SEC, for example, if they're looking at these buildings where they spend the majority of their time and really reflect their time spent at OSU, I think ensuring that those buildings reflect a commitment to sustainability does create a culture of sustainability. Knowing that when you do turn on a light bulb, it's not coming from a coal-fired power plant. It's coming from the PV panels on the top on the roof. Yeah. So I do think that, and also really making those as transparent as possible and making it very clear to students that this is what we have here, this is what it does, this is why it's sustainable, and essentially this is why we value sustainability as something that we essentially value sustainability as an institution.
Yeah, let's see, most of those are.
This is really, an outdated piece of information.
That.
Yeah.
That was because that was developed more at the beginning of the year.
Yes.
But there's not. I don't really see the justification yet. Sure, I understand talking about it. Like we have all these ideas, but there's really no hard justification yet that I've really seen or heard coming from next year. If you guys show up, look at this. We've talked to all these different student fee organizations. They're all into this. We've done these assessments, these studies, and all this interaction with students. Yeah, but I just don't see that justification there yet.
Can I say?
Yeah.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
So I apologize for being late, but is there the sustainability office on campus? Are there other organizations that do similar work like that? Like with Plagman or with PV and all of that? Is there another office that would be better suited for doing university improvements to accessibility, sustainability, that, then student fees could be used for like programs and initiatives, for students more directly.
Definitely. And so I think that, yes, the Sustainability Office is responsible, and correct me if I'm wrong, but really their top priority and what they're really focused on is the ENG funded buildings. So unfortunately, that leaves a lack of funding and a lack of a body and organization that's focused on improving the sustainability on these student fee funded buildings. To my knowledge, there's no other organization on campus that is focused on doing that work. The SSI is it. And I'm sorry, there was another point. Was there another point with that?
Nope, that was
Oh, okay.
I have a few things.
Yeah.
Okay, so talking about building culture sustainability, right? It's a great idea, and I think it's a wonderful mission, for your organization to have. It's necessary. So I don't want to try and dispute that at all. But what I am curious about is so when we're looking at a responsible work down, of that capital. So typically you would have what we've seen, right, of an organization saying, okay, over the next 7 years, this is what we want to see, right? Whereas here, like when Brad's talking about, why do you need all this to spend that right now? What you're really doing is you're saying, okay, we're going to have all these huge projects right now, so people will be able to see that. And then I see very few projects kind of like in store for the next few years. So if you're still asking for a green fee that high, how you're planning on spending that down after, like in the future, right? So if you go ahead and you have, these 5 projects, right, with, that we're currently talking about, and you do spend down, $1 million or $1.3 million, and then you're still receiving that a relatively high fee, though, what types of projects do you have in store that would be able to use that substantial amount of money that you don't see the importance of working down some of that, that fund in your actual operating expense, like in your operating budget? You know what I mean?
Yeah. So I think, to be perfectly honest, I feel like we had a good plan put together for years out. So this was, let's see, it was this one didn't have the auto sum on it, but it was $1.3 million worth of projects that, good projects, good payback, things that would have a really, demonstrable impact on sustainability at the institution. And after the review committee, we essentially had to scrap that. And that's fine. It's perfectly fine to start from scratch. And I think it's good that we're being able to expand and diversify the kind of projects that we're working on. But I think it's unfair to expect that between December and a month off for winter break and this entire budget process and putting everything together to come up with another comprehensive list of sustainability projects for a couple years out. I think I know that we can come up with them. I know that we can find good, valuable projects that really have an impact on at OSU, that students can really tangibly experience. We simply have not had that time to put it together.
And I'm sure you all can as well.
And
I guess what I'm kind of trying to say is to look at that spend down. What you're seeing is like, okay, we have too much money. They want us to work this down. It's a huge amount to spend down really quickly, and so for people who are elected by students to make sure that these organizations are using their money responsibly, it doesn't look, just if you looked at a graph of that spend, how much you spend, it wouldn't really look like a very responsible use of it. And also going back, so you're talking about how long this plan had been in place. So when I made a comment, rebuttal saying that there had been a 1-year trend of not spending the green fee. So we can only see, and so I'm assuming you're referring to the year before the spending freeze, correct?
Yes.
So that's the only year we can see. But would I be wrong in assuming that if you only spent a quarter of the green fee in fiscal year 12, that you only spent a quarter or half of the green fee in fiscal year 11 and so forth? Am I wrong in assuming that? Because you said there's only been 1 year that trend has happened.
And let me clarify too, FY11, $100,000 for the revolving loan fund. Everything else from the green fee went to RECs. So we didn't start doing any renewable energy projects at that point in time. FY12, our first project was Dixon Rec Center, a large-scale solar water heating installation. That was, Brandon, about $370,000? $370,000. So looking at, and honestly, I'm not quite sure on that for the FY12 why there's only $83,000 taken back, because we did take out $370,000 from that.
For 11-12?
For FY12, yes, actual 11-12. We took that money out for a plant fund to get the Dixon Rec Center started. Unfortunately, and once again, there's been some challenges with that. We are exploring other things as far as, because originally it was on one portion of the roof, we're looking at a different area now because, some issues with structural assessment.
Why would
So
$300,000, like why
yeah.
would you be missing $200,000 from that line item within your budget that would justify why you need that fee level?
I'm sorry, say that again?
Why are you missing then $200,000 within that line item to justify why you need that fee level set at the level that it is? If you did actually use that $370,000 that year, why is it only reported as you using $83,674 that year?
I honestly don't know, but
I think
yeah.
The 370 may have come from FY11.
Okay.
So, that's my hunch.
Yeah.
And then there was an 83 or 84 that came from 12, I believe.
Okay.
There's probably.
Did we start in FY11?
You did.
Yeah.
Okay,
There's probably
sorry, that was
there's
my
probably
mistake.
300 in FY11 and 80.
You're right. So it was, so it was,
Okay.
that's it. It was 370 in FY11, the 80 in FY12.
I believe the last year,
So-
the large renewable energy certificate purchase was maybe 10, FY10.
Yeah.
Okay. So then my last question then in regards to all of
Mhm.
those kind of points that I brought up. So if you are looking at, what's it say, by July 1st, you're gonna
Mhm.
reduce the fund balance down to $306,000. Have all of the projects that you plan on spending have they been approved like already? Like if you're allowed to basically go back, after these budgets are approved, you're basically able to spend that money within the working capital down right there. Like that project's approved and you're going to be able to do that, or is it like this is a project we want to do, we kind of had to scrap it and start from scratch, like you mentioned before, so we're still in the initial process of hopefully we'll be able to do this, because otherwise you're going to be you're not reflecting the possibility of not spending $350,000 and not reducing the fee that much, then you'd still be 1,000% over the OUS recommended.
Certainly. Yes, as I mentioned with the Student Experience Center, there was interest expressed from the project manager for that. So I think that, as I said, we have simply not had the time to put together a comprehensive list of projects. There, especially for the SEC alone, we could spend $400,000 like that on valuable.
For the ones that you're
Yeah.
planning on spending down to make sure that by July
Oh, sorry, the
1st,
350.
those are, yeah.
Sorry, the 350. Yes, no, those are good to go. We're working on finishing up an MOU between the SSI and Rec Sports.
Okay.
There shouldn't be any snags. Either be any updates, yeah.
The one issue I saw in one of your slides was the revolving loan fund was shown at a $300,000 expenditure when we only have 170 allocated to the Salmon Disease Lab project.
But I was talking about as far as, moving
moving
that to a separate index as far as representing that is an actual separate fund other than just what's in our fund balance.
So you would basically add $300,000 to the current $300,000 and then subtract the $160,000 that you're loaning for the salmon project.
Yes.
Tori, did you have something? Oh, you saw that.
Well, then what else do you have on store, like in line after that project for the revolving loan fund if you're justifying doubling the amount that you currently have in that fund?
We are not talking about doubling the amount of
Well,
fund
you're
for
adding
the.
$300,000 to a $300,000 fund and only using.
Sorry, did you say adding 300? No.
Are you moving $300,000 into
No,
the revolving loan fund?
I'm sorry,
Or
to
no,
make
you just
that, let me try and make that more clear. What we're doing is, let me pull up that slide again. So that $300,000 for the revolving loan fund, that was added in there for FY10, FY11, and FY12. We capitalized it with $100,000 for each one of those years, and we discontinued capitalizing it after that. So that is $300,000 that is currently sitting in our fund balance.
Yeah.
That is technically a loan that loans money out and has money coming back in. And what we've talked about is creating a new index for it to make it more transparent and make it easier to track the things that are going in and out of it.
Index basically for the two fund balances, so you see that
Yeah.
like working capital and you see the fund balance for the revolving loan fund.
Yes.
It
So
would be the
what?
same fund balance.
Pardon?
Just for the record, it'd be the
It's-
same fund balance.
Yeah. So with that, with a separate index, even though we still have a fund balance in there, we'll be getting $160,000 out the door. And I mean, we try and find projects that, I mean, considering this is money that's coming back to us with interest.
Sure. I
Oh
was
yeah.
curious. Now that you
Yeah.
mentioned that, awesome.
Yeah, and I think that there's certainly, to get that other $140,000 out the door, I think we certainly can.
No,
Yeah.
definitely. I was just curious.
Okay.
Yeah, I thought that you were moving working capital into the revolving
No.
loan fund in order
Sorry.
to increase that fund amount, and that's, okay.
Nope, sorry, yeah, that's pre-existing.
Yeah.
Tori, did you have something? Okay, they should right now. For the.
Sorry. Hello?
Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, I was on mute. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, everyone can hear you.
Okay. First of all, I just wanted to say really good job on the presentation because I can tell that y'all have taken into consideration everything that the review board recommended, and then you tailored it to like your own visions and goals that you have for SSI. And so I think you guys did a really good job finding that happy medium.
Thanks.
I do think that Heather brings up like a really good point with the $100,000, and that kind of goes back to do that the review board was talking about, which was just like over projecting the money and trying to find like a more concise and efficient way to make sure that like this money that we're asking for is actually how much we need. But I do have a question, and that is, have you all considered more the creation of a new position to be dedicated solely to researching alternative funding resources, or have you like discussed that more? Because that was another thing that the review board recommended, but I didn't hear you say anything about it.
Yeah, well, I had mentioned that with the creation of a professional staff position and having somebody that's coming on full time, that will allow us to research different grant opportunities and write grants and apply for them and hopefully receive some funding. So I do think that is something that a full-time professional staff position could assist with to a large degree. As far as creating a new like student position to focus on grant writing, that was not something, we had a very brief kind of informal conversation about that. The consensus was, I mean, it'd be difficult to try and find a really, I guess, ideal student that has grant writing experience and has that level of expertise to really, I'd say, make that position worthwhile. But of course, I mean, if anybody has differing opinions, we'd be interested in hearing that.
Just,
Yeah.
The thought I had was with the intern positions that you were talking about. If their focus is like researching grants, or if they do anything to do with that.
Certainly. I mean, that is not an internship position that we currently have. That is certainly one that we could create, and I don't think it would be that much kind of, I guess, like kind of oversight and working with them as much as it would be compared to some of the other interns. So, yeah, that's a good idea, and that's something that we can explore.
Well, I think the internship program is a great idea to get people introduced into the work that y'all are doing, and then like having them become a paid position later on. Like, I just think it's a really good idea. So
Great,
I
thanks.
commend you guys on that.
Thanks.
Is that all you had? Right for right now? Okay,
that
cool.
was my
I mean,
question.
yeah, remember, you can just speak up whenever you want.
Okay, I will try to get a word in edgewise, but thank you.
Yeah.
About the professional faculty position, if that were to be approved, what do you see that timeline looking like? Do you know how close are you to having a position description for that and knowing kind of the exact functions that you're looking for with that position?
Certainly, and we've talked a lot about what we all kind of envision this position looking like. So at this point, it's more kind of a lot of kind of notes from those conversations.
Yeah.
So I think we all have a pretty similar understanding of what we want this position to be doing. So we just need to actually put the PD together. And I know that as soon as we get that done, or as soon as if we did get it approved, we would start working on the PD immediately so we could start advertising it. And Emily, it was a letter of intent?
Rationale letter.
There we go.
Positions already been submitted to the ABC, and we will be discussing a draft position description at the SSI board meeting this Friday with the intent to get the draft position description to the ABC during the week of February 11th. So after that point, then we'll be looking at
So it may be an aggressive timeline, but ideally, we're really hoping to be able to have the position on maybe during maybe at the start of the fiscal year would be ideal, but maybe more like August, at least before orientation and everything and all the new staff are coming on.
I know, I mean, you know, you all have been doing a lot since December, so, I mean, I get that it's not done yet, and it sounds like it's hoping to be done very soon, but I think that this committee would be really interested in having a draft or some sort of, wherever you guys are at, as far as what that position description looks like. And I don't know if that's something that the committee would be interested in having by the open hearing on Tuesday, if it's possible to look at that. The position description.
We can get you a draft before Tuesday.
Yeah, they're meeting about it on Friday and might have something
Okay.
to let us know. Because I would just personally like to see that. I don't know how that would impact any sort of decision, but.
Yeah, I mean, it would, I think it would be very helpful to have a position description.
Yeah.
How would you want to go about approving it? Would you not want to approve it until we get one? Like, we could tentatively just approve an amount without that amount included.
I mean, I don't know.
I mean.
Because if something were to happen on Friday, then I don't think that would mean we wouldn't approve it, so.
Are there any like particular questions that you have right now that may
Yeah, could you
kind of
talk
help?
maybe about what their role would be within the SSI as far as supervising students versus supporting students?
Certainly. And one thing that we have agreed on is that we want this very much to be more an advisor to the program and support for the SSI. We are pretty adamantly opposed to the idea of creating essentially the director position, morphing that into a professional staff position. So we still want, so I mean, on paper, obviously, they're supervising them, they sign their time cards, everything like that. But we really want it to be the same kind of model that we've had the last couple of years with Emily and Brandon, as far as really supporting the student needs, supporting what they're interested in, ensuring best practices occur, but not directing the kind of projects that they work on in the program as a whole. So essentially, it will just be largely expanding on the support that we have been receiving from our current advisors.
Okay. And do you think they'll be housed out of the center?
I think it would make the most amount of sense to house them in the Student Sustainability Center.
Space for that?
We can do that, yeah.
Very cool. All right, well, that sounds good so far, so.
Also about that, the wages.
Mhm.
So the 40,000 additional requests for the student pay, I saw you're gonna hire one more student and also increase the hours. I wonder how is that? I mean, it seems like, I think your actuals are, I mean, I think your approved amount was low compared to what you're actually gonna
Certainly.
spend this year in that item. So is it like, how many more hours are they gonna be working a week? That's what.
So really, and I think the reason that we were really far under the last couple of years is I think that we didn't take into consideration things like people working during finals week, people working over breaks, people working during the summer, I guess potentially having more students that are interested in working over the summer. And if there are things, if their work is valuable to be working on then I think that is something that we should have. And another thing that's really intensive is we have students work about 30 to 40 hours a week for the 2 weeks before classes start for the general kind of like orientation. And of course with the creation of the new position. So we're not necessarily creating their weekly hours. So regular coordinators are staying at 10 to 15, administrative coordinator and director are staying at 15 to 20. But I mean, the little things like breaks over the summer, finals week, those really start to add up over the year.
So
Yeah, Eric, did you have something to add to that?
So just to add a little bit more to that, we've noticed when we've had other positions, like if this advisor position moves forward, there's just a better way for moving long-term projects and getting the students who are going to be engaging in more outreach and educational programming, getting them more intentionally focused. Whereas now they might be working on a project. If folks are familiar with MEPC's older model, people would work really intently on one event and then not do much other parts of the year. Whereas with adding this advisor position and helping to really gain more in that education outreach thing, you're going to see more consistent time used over the course of the year, which will add to that overall student pay line expenditure.
Oh, and sorry, one more thing that I forgot with that as well is what we tried last year for the first time that I think we would really like to do this year and in subsequent years as well, is during spring term, after we got everybody hired for the following year for staff, we had the new staff working simultaneously with the current staff, usually only like about 5 hours a week or so, but we felt like that was a really valuable opportunity to actually get the hands-on experience of actually knowing what it's like to work with a project, or what it's actually like to be a project coordinator, and start to really familiarize themselves with their position so they could be more effective in it. So that's something that, once again, increases cost just a little bit, having essentially, and not everybody can do it, but let's say 7 additional staff members working 5 hours a week for the last few weeks of the school year.
Okay,
Yes.
so then on top of that, so I'm assuming that if you've gone over, obviously, going over your approved budget, your actual cost being that much higher, rather than having excess hours be counted like as volunteer hours, as some student fee-funded organizations do. You've been paying them regardless of the amount that you have allocated. Are you basically, I mean, do you think that this could be a guarantee that you're saying that by this increase that you're asking for, you would no longer be doing that, even if there's greater demand for the SSI, or if more people want to work for the SSI, or there's like more projects? Like, because if you keep growing in, popularity or whatever, and more people want to be a part of the organization, and, people, you have, a lot of, projects down the pipeline. How are you going to ensure that you don't continue to that trend of spending more on pay than you're actually budgeted for?
Well, I think to answer your question, as far as having individuals work past the number of hours, and I mean, at least what we've always been told is if you're capped at like 15 hours a week, you're not allowed to work more than that, and even you're not allowed to volunteer past that. So that's the policy that we've always been instructed of. So individuals that have a 15-hour cap per week, they have a 15-hour cap per week. So it'd be against policy for them to work beyond that. What we're simply doing is we're not getting people to work more hours per week. We're simply allowing them to be able to work in other parts of the year where originally we did not have that in our budget. So when there are very necessary things that they need to be working on, perhaps during finals week or over breaks, that is in the budget, and they can work to do that. And
that's the only place that you were going over before,
is things like that. And even, like I said, it's just a lot of little things that I think we've forgotten in the past that add up. So training and orientation, another example. So, yeah.
Wait, actually, I do have one more question about that. So if you're going to do that to allow them to work that, will there be a requirement during those times to make sure? Because if they don't work that time, then you just have more money going back into your...
We do have that in the position descriptions, that there is a requirement.
If you have increase, then you would be required to work these hours over the breaks that they weren't currently funded for. Because then if they don't work those times that they weren't currently funded for, you just have excess money in and out.
I'm sorry, can you say that one more time a little bit slower?
So will these student workers be required then to work during finals week or over break? Well, so then if you're requesting more money to allow them to do that, but you're not requiring them to do that, if they choose not to do that, you're going to have excess money within that salary because you just requested money for them to be able to work at that time. Now you're just generating more excess money that would go back into the fund balance or be used elsewhere, in the budget, but it's not... Like, you know what I mean? Like,
the thing is, but what we budgeted for, though, is we're not, I guess, budgeting to allow people to work 15 hours a week during finals week and breaks. We're budgeting them to work a few extra hours. So we're saying across the board, everybody, let's say during break, they can work an extra 4 hours a week. Some people may want to work 8. Some people are not going to work at all. So there's obviously a little uncertainty when it comes to budgeting for wages and how much people are actually going to work. But we tried to figure this out so that on average we're going to be staying about on par. But yeah.
Sorry to jump in, but we were very intentional about looking at where that money was coming from. So this person really needed to work over break to accomplish X, Y, and Z, and so accounted for that. And added that to their position and add that money to that position. We didn't just randomly say, okay, all the staff is going to work the breaks or whatever. We really looked at who needs to, and added that to those positions, not all of
Okay.
the positions.
So in that case, then, did you work with any other student-funded organizations to figure out if they handle pay in a similar manner? Just because, I mean, pay is really one of the easiest parts to budget for, because it's, you will be paid this amount of money for this many hours, and that's basically it. So if you have like this lump sum of like, they'll probably work this much, you have still the possibility, like you said, it's a guess, there's gonna be that chance that they won't actually work that amount for, you know, those
It's not
extra hours that
probably
they've been
because
budgeted for.
It's been written in to say, you know, without the notes from our meeting in front of me, but it's been written in to say 5 new positions. And
Okay.
these 5 positions will work over the breaks and will work finals week, where some of the others don't need to, and there isn't the continuity, and there isn't the staff, you know, like professional staff support on campus over winter break or summer break or whatnot. So it's been very intentional.
And so it won't be a requirement
not
within the
gonna be a
position
huge-
description, it'll just be an understanding within the organization, basically, that's what you're
Yeah.
hoping for?
I can
Exactly.
just about guarantee we're not gonna end up with more extra money from that. It's been very intentional about what positions it goes to and why.
And really, I mean, as far as taking breaks as an example, that comes out to, or amounts to a pretty small amount of the overall increase in wages. The bulk of it, I would say, are things like the director, for example, even. That is something, a position that really ought to be working 15 to 20 hours a week year round, and 40 during orientation, actually closer to 40 during the summers. And I think that is something that in the past, we didn't do as good of a job budgeting for.
I like this here. I think that that's a really good idea. Having worked in other student organizations, I think that that does make a lot of sense. And I think that not having it super written down gives you flexibility that you need, because that is just something that needs flexibility. Back to the professional faculty, and with Brad's question, I think that for now, I personally, as a member on this committee, wouldn't, like when we do our tentative approval, I would not include the professional faculty in it yet, with the intention of approving it at the final hearing, just hoping to get some document about the intention of that, so that when we do approve it, I really like where it's headed and where that's going. But any sort of written thing that says these are the bones, these are the ideas, what you said to me here, but basically that written, I think would just be important, so that in future, like next year, they could say, okay, this is the idea that passed, what did it turn into, this is what we've approved, and so on. So I really like the idea. I just think that having that before the final hearing will be really helpful in actually adding that in. So.
Yeah, and as Emily said, I think we can get that too.
Yeah, and it sounds like that timeline seems to be kind of on track. And you already have stuff somewhat written, so.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
Brad.
Okay, we're gonna take a quick 10-minute recess and reconvene at 7:40, because we're gonna talk amongst ourselves about the working capital.
Earlier than that, because they're waiting.
Okay, we'll take a 7-minute recess and reconvene at 7:35. Because we're gonna talk about the working capital.
Cool.
Cool.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So we're gonna reconvene officially. So what we talked about was we came to an estimation of what, I mean, sure, you have restricted amounts, but we came to an estimation of what your actual fund balance will probably be at the end of this year. It's gonna be at about 1.42 million, and then 46.5 thousand of that would be your OUS recommended. So in excess, you're about 1.38 million.
And sorry, to clarify, that's not taking into consideration any other expenditures for
It's
FY13,
taking into
right?
consideration your operating expenditures for this year and the salmon lab.
Okay.
And your bike
In agreement.
cover.
Okay.
Not the rec sports tennis center,
Okay.
because we think it's a good idea if there's about 390 in the fund for solar hot water. Was that about 390? Remember that? Okay,
What we used to
it's
see for
close,
senior
about
group?
390,000. When I talked to Bill Callen today, he was much more, I guess, from what I can tell, it seems like the PV on the tennis center is much more readily available and can be started sooner than hot water on Dixon. So what we think is a good idea, if you transfer the money, so it'll be about $300,000 out of that fund, and,
Sorry, from what was originally allocated
allocated
for
to.
rec sports for
to
solar.
Hot water, I mean,
okay.
yeah, so it's, I mean, it'd still be rec sports, just for a different
Totally.
purpose. And then that would get the ball, and then, so you can get the ball going on the PV. And then, I think there still needs to be a lot more communication with rec sports on how the solar hot water, if it is gonna be solar hot water, if maybe just PV on Dixon will look like, because I know they were saying about, they need a feasibility study for entire Dixon,
Yeah.
because they might be expanding, so they don't know how that roof that is not the natatorium, but one to the left, if you're looking at the entrance, will
Yeah.
look like maybe in 3 years. And so do you get where I'm coming at from that?
Yeah.
Okay. So, and then we also feel that we understand where you're coming out for the green fee. However, we want to see the justification, and it's really just a ballpark number with really not much justification. And so we kind of felt that that green fee was unnecessary for this year. And so that was $100,000 out. That brought the budget down to about $290. And then we added back in the interest that you'll receive that was projected from the fund balance, which is about $12,100. And then interest from the Salmon Lab, which is about $800 for this year. Just real quick on that, Salmon Lab, so is it paid back installments, principal and interest, or just interest and then principal at the end?
I believe it's principal and interest
Okay.
at an annual
So
basis.
you'll actually get like $33,000 a year, which
And-
$800 is interest.
Yeah, and
Okay.
obviously the intent of those funds is to put that
Stay
back
in
into the revolving loan
Yes.
fund, yeah.
Yes, that, I think that's a good idea, so kind of.
So it
it
grows
might-
over time, obviously.
Yeah, I think that's sound. And then we also, decided that we felt drawing down your working capital by $67,100, which is $1 per student per term, is appropriate. And we also got rid of the position for this fee amount. However, I think that will be resolved relatively easily come Tuesday. Yeah, so that brings your fee down to $2.14, and your actual income, you could say, would be closer to $3.14, because $1 of that is you're being transferred, it's a transfer from your fund balance. And then I think the working capital, we feel how that amount is fair for right now. I mean, come the open hearing, if you can bring evidence, or if you feel that's not fair and you want to discuss more about that, I think that's an appropriate time to do that, as well as behind the scenes over the next week. But for right now, that's what we feel is the fair amount for drawing down your working capital.
So one thing to clarify, when you were talking about, okay, so the money that we currently have in the plant fund for the solar hot water, moving that instead to fund the solar projects, the
Yes.
PV with Dixon. So essentially that gives us even more money that's flexible for medium to large scale sustainability projects. And they were also talking
Wait,
about
hold on, how
another
does that do that?
decrease, sorry, yeah.
Wait, what do you mean by that?
Well, because, so if we're taking, from our fund balance, we were planning on using $350 for those projects, and we add another $370,000, because I mean, if we
Let's
move the money
say
out of the fund balance,
that-
then we have an
It's
extra.
not actually even,
Yeah.
I'm not actually sure how that would work. I don't think it would even be transferred into a fund balance. It would just be transferred into another fund designated for the tennis center.
Yeah.
So it wouldn't actually be transferred into your, I
Or-
think there's an interesting piece would be, there's actually still be money left over in the solar hot water.
Yeah.
So I think that's maybe, we can look in that more over the next months.
Yeah, I
And
guess
see what to do with that.
What I was saying is, so that $350 is going into a different plant fund now, correct?
Well,
Isn't that what you said?
so we do need to discuss, because at the end of the year, I looked back at my notes just to make sure, but we did only agree on the tennis center. We didn't really talk about the tennis pavilion as well, so that jumps up from 300 to 350. I mean, I think, so there's 390 in the hot water.
Mm-hmm.
I think it'd be, it's So I'd be open
Actually,
to both the
yeah.
pavilion, and so you have 350 designated for that, so that, and then you still have 40,000 left in this, well, Dixon would have 40,000 left in the hot water that we would discuss what to do with.
Cool. I think, to be honest, after, you know, all of this, I think I'm starting to get a little tired and more difficult to process things. Would you mind, I mean, pretty much everything that you discussed and put together in the plan that, you know, shifting away from what we proposed, would you mind sending me that information so we can
Oh,
talk about it as a
definitely.
group in more detail
We'll
tomorrow,
definitely
so we
do
can
that.
give you a more
Yeah.
prepared and
Okay,
yeah,
that's just-
response and a more informed response?
Yeah,
Okay.
that's kind of what our thought is about this,
Perfect.
and I think that's what we're gonna
Great.
do for tonight.
Perfect.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so is there any more discussion in the committee? If not, I entertain a motion.
I move to tentatively approve SSI's fall entrance fee at $2.14.
Second.
All right. That was Nick, right? Second that? Any discussion on the motion? If hearing none, we'll move into a roll call vote. And because we are cutting this more than 10%, it needs to be unanimous. Amelia,
4.
Tyler,
4.
Nick,
4.
Madison,
4.
Tori.
4.
Did you all hear that? Okay. And Tara's gone. Okay, so that motion passes unanimously, 5-0, to tentatively set SSI's fall, winter, spring fee at $2.14. As a reminder, as tentative, we'll set the final fee level at on February 12th in the MU Ballroom at 5 p.m. And I will get you the schedule on when you will appear relatively soon too.
Great, thank you.
Cool, thank you. Thank you for the presentation. It was, I thought you were very well informed compared to what I've seen in the past about your budget and your organization.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Brian.
Good evening.
Is yours going back at